I was still at my father's grave when the email hit. Termination notice, job abandonment. No call, no warning. Just 3 cold lines that erased 9 years of loyalty like I was nothing. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The cold didn't register, not the way it should have. The November wind slashed through my coat and caught my throat like wire, but I stood there, numb, staring at the glow of my phone like it wasn't real. Like maybe my eyes had betrayed me worse than my employer just had. But no, there it was. That sterile, clipped subject line that cut deeper than any words I'd ever read. Termination notice, job abandonment. The world seemed to tilt. My hands went cold, fingers losing feeling, phone nearly slipping from my grasp, not from grief. That had its own quieter rhythm. This was rage. Pure, disorienting, silent rage. Only an hour earlier, I'd watched my father's casket lower into the ground, felt the hollowness in my mother's grip as she clung to me, fragile as a whisper. He'd fought so hard to stay lucid those final weeks, asking me to promise I'd take care of her. I did. I was. And now I was jobless. Not because I failed, not because I made a mistake, but because I chose to be a son instead of an employee for 3 damn days. And Marla? She had the nerve to smile at me last Tuesday as I handed in the formal leave request. "Go," she said, with that Botox-stiff smile. "Take care of what matters." Apparently, what mattered was being on a Zoom call while my dad's body cooled in a pine box. I opened the email again, as if reading it twice would somehow change the outcome. Your failure to attend this morning's strategic call represents a violation of your responsibilities. Your access has been revoked effective immediately. That's it. No mention of my leave, no acknowledgement of my father. No thanks for nearly a decade of 70-hour weeks, product launches I salvaged, or the 8-figure client I personally retained last quarter. The betrayal was clinical. That's what stung the most. Not even the decency of confrontation. Just a quiet purge, like I was a file on a cluttered desktop. Right-click, delete. I sank onto the stone bench across from the gravesite, gravel biting through my slacks. In front of me, my father's name etched into polished granite, birth and death years neatly balanced by a dash. Behind me, my phone buzzed with silence. No calls, no apologies, just the sudden, deafening truth. I was expendable. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just angry. I was awake. The house was too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it scratches. Grief echoes in that kind of silence. You hear every creak, every shallow breath, and it makes the pain louder. I dropped my bag by the door and didn't bother changing. The knot in my tie hung limp, half undone like the last thread of order I still had control over. My hands moved mechanically, laptop out, email open, fingers clacking like a courtroom stenographer desperate to record a wrong. I sent everything. Every email thread, every timestamp, the subject line, leave approved, see attached, no response. I called HR, twice, voicemail both times. On the 3rd try, someone picked up and then hung up without a word. That was my confirmation. Not just that I was out, but that no one was going to help. They weren't ignoring me because they were confused. They were complicit. The decision had already been made, the trail already scrubbed. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a liability. And then came her text. "This is business, Ben. We needed you. You chose family." I read it once, then again. That sentence shouldn't have felt like a knife. It wasn't profane. It wasn't even aggressive. But it sliced cleaner than any insult. You chose family, like it was a betrayal. Like sitting beside my mother at her husband's grave was some kind of dereliction of duty. I remembered how Marla used to introduce me in meetings. "Ben's our anchor. He holds this place together. Now I was driftwood, a problem solved with a policy and a click, and I had seen it coming. For months, she pushed Evan into my orbit, like a new piece of office furniture no one asked for. He was all gloss and no grit. Suits too expensive, questions too rehearsed. She called him sharp, but he never asked about legacy systems or integration flow. He just kept asking how soon I thought he'd be ready to lead something. I should have known. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I gave them all the benefit of the doubt, because I thought 9 years meant something, because I thought loyalty wasn't naive, because I thought grief was human and that maybe, just maybe, I'd earned the right to be human. I sat on the couch beside my mother, her hands clasped tight around tissues damp with sorrow, and I didn't say a word. She didn't ask. She knew. And as her sobs returned to that steady rhythm of heartbreak, I stared at my screen, at Marla's message glowing with quiet cruelty, and something deep inside me began to harden. I wasn't broken. I was being forged. The light on my desk was dim but steady, unlike the thoughts racing through my head. I had spent that weekend exactly the way I'd spent 100 others for Vertex. Bent over documents, red-penning inconsistencies, cross-referencing policy against policy until my eyes blurred. Only this time, I wasn't working for them. I was working against them. The betrayal still sat like a weight on my chest, but beneath it, something else had begun to stir. Resolve. I wasn't looking for pity. I was looking for leverage. And that's when I found it. Section 9.4.2 of the HR Manual. In the event of employee termination within 5 business days following approval of bereavement leave, the matter must be escalated to Executive Human Resources and subject to final legal review and documentation. 2 layers of oversight, 2 signatures, neither of which existed. My heart didn't race. It anchored. This wasn't a lifeline. It was a weapon. A policy I'd helped write, ironically, after another colleague was fired mid-divorce. Back then, they called it compassion. Now, it was the crack in the armor I needed. I didn't hesitate. I called Karen Stiles, a legal scalpel with a memory like a vault. She'd left Vertex after a public falling out with Marla over budget manipulation, and I knew she hadn't forgotten. I gave her everything. The emails, the Slack logs, the time-stamped approval of my leave, the termination notice, even Marla's smug little text. Karen was quiet. Then she said, calm as a lit fuse, "Ben, they're gonna wish they fired you politely." By Monday morning, the paperwork was filed. Wrongful termination, procedural violation, retaliation, emotional distress. And we didn't just target HR, we named Marla Klein personally. But fate, as it often does in stories like these, threw us a gift. Tuesday afternoon, Evan, bright-eyed and still green enough to underestimate the weight of a company-wide Slack channel, typed the following. Now that Ben's out, we can finally shift the pitch to my version of the rollout. The message exploded across the company. Some laughed, some cringed. 37 employees forwarded it to me, including, most notably, the CTO, who attached a single word, unbelievable. By Friday, my inbox chimed with a calendar invite. Not from HR, not from Marla, from Vertex's executive board. The call was terse, corporate, painfully polished. They opened with an apology, then slid directly into a settlement offer. 6 months salary, NDA, clean reference. I didn't even blink before I said no, because when your dignity is buried, no payout resurrects it. But truth? Truth sharpens. It started as a whisper, an anonymous post on a modest workplace justice blog. No names, no direct quotes, just the outline of a story, a loyal employee, a father's funeral, a betrayal sealed by an email subject line. But truth has a way of slipping through cracks, and this one surged like water through stone. By morning, the headline was everywhere: fired for attending Dad's funeral. I hadn't spoken to the press. I hadn't written a word. But someone inside Vertex had. And they didn't leak the story for scandal. They did it for justice. In a world where silence protects power, someone chose to speak. That mattered. The fallout came fast. First came the denials, then the clarifications, and then the resignation. Marla Klein stepped down by Thursday. No farewell memo, no curated LinkedIn goodbye. Just a sudden disappearance from the internal directory. Evan followed shortly after, officially let go for breach of conduct. The company's language was vague, sterile, safe. But everyone knew. You don't gut your middle management if everything's fine. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I didn't need to. Some victories land in the chest, not in the glass. When Next Frame Tech offered me a position, I didn't hesitate. A 30% salary bump, remote flexibility, and a leadership role where empathy wasn't just a buzzword. It was policy. But that wasn't the real win. The real win came when I sat across from Karen Stiles, legal pads between us, and we drafted the charter for right to grieve. We didn't want revenge. We wanted architecture. A structure that could hold others when their world fell apart. A place where employees punished for being human had advocates, not just hope. Within weeks, the inbox flooded. Stories from teachers, nurses, warehouse staff, temp workers, some with tears, some with fury, all of them hungry for fairness. And then came the message. No legal question, no call for action. Just a single email from someone I'd never met. I showed your story to my boss after my mom died. They gave me 2 weeks paid leave. You changed my life. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat in silence, not the kind that scratches, but the kind that heals. I didn't ask for war. I asked for 3 days. Grief is not a liability. Compassion is not optional. And loyalty in the right hands is not weakness, it's strength. So if someone tries to punish you for being human, you remind them you're not disposable, and you never were.